"Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel." She ordered red wine, leaned in close to him, and laughed like I was already dead. That's how the night of our 10-year anniversary began. They say betrayal feels like a knife in the back. That's wrong. It feels like sitting across the room, watching your wife toss her hair and touch another man's knee while your hands shake inside your jacket pocket. Because inside is the letter you wrote her. One she'll never read the same way again. I wasn't supposed to be there yet. Janine had told me to meet her at 7:30, but I arrived an hour early. Not to spy. God no, I just wanted to talk to the staff, make sure everything was perfect. Special table, discreet dessert with a candle, the whole deal. 10 years. That's worth something, right? Apparently not. I was still confirming with the hostess when I heard her voice. That soft, fake giggly tone she used back when she still tried to impress people. My ears locked in before my eyes did. She was already there. Not alone. They sat at a corner booth, dimly lit, her back to the wall, his hands resting too comfortably on the table. Could have left. I could have turned around and walked out. But my legs moved without me. I ducked behind a fake potted tree like some dollar store spy, heart pounding in my ears. She was talking about our honeymoon in Big Sur. Only, she left out one detail me. It was wild, she told him. Those cliffs? I thought I'd fall off. He laughed. Sounds like something you'd do. She leaned in. I almost did. But I was younger, dumber. He smiled. You're still wild, huh? And then she touched his tie. I'm not proud of what happened next. I walked straight up, slid the envelope across the table and whispered, "For the woman I married 10 years ago, let me know if you see her." She froze. He went pale. I didn't wait for either of them to say a word. I turned, walked to the exit, and never looked back. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of them. But that letter, it had words I'll never get back. And I wonder, when she read it, if she ever wished she could crawl inside and rewind everything. Spoiler, she didn't. The weirdest part about walking away from someone like that, someone you loved for a decade, is that the world doesn't pause for your heartbreak. I stepped out into the cool night air, half expecting a movie-style thunderclap or some cosmic cue that the moment mattered. But there was nothing. Just traffic, neon lights, and a parking meter blinking expired like it didn't care I just left my wife mid-flirt over wine. I didn't go home. Couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I drove. Nowhere in particular. I turned left, then right, avoiding familiar streets, dodging memories like potholes. The letter, God, that stupid letter was still burning in my mind. I had poured my entire soul into it. It wasn't just happy anniversary fluff. It was real. Honest. I wrote about our early days, our late-night drives to nowhere, the way she used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. I even included a line I found in an old poem. Some people are homes, others are hotels. I had ended the letter with that. Looking back, I realized she was never my home. Just a temporary stay. A warm lobby with a checkout time I didn't know had passed. Hours passed before I pulled up in front of the house. The lights were off, which didn't surprise me. She hadn't come home yet. I sat in the car, engine still running, my hands clenching the steering wheel like I was afraid it would vanish if I let go. Then my phone lit up. Janine, where are you? No apology. No explanation. Just a question like she had lost track of her umbrella, not her husband. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at that message until the screen went black again. I wanted to believe that what I saw tonight was a mistake. That the man was just a friend, that her laughter was nervous, that the hand on his knee was some bizarre coincidence in body language. But the truth was clear. She had forgotten who we were, and maybe she never really cared to remember. By midnight, she still wasn't home. I opened the door, stepped inside, and the silence hit like a wall. No scent of her perfume, no echo of heels, no trace of the woman I married, just shadows and stale air. I walked to our bedroom and saw her vanity drawer half open. Lipstick smeared on a tissue, a wine cork on the dresser, and a bracelet I gave her 2 Christmases ago, sitting like it didn't belong anymore. I laid on the bed, fully clothed, the letter she never deserved replaying in my head word for word. And as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered, had I been holding on to someone who had already let go? Tomorrow I would start asking real questions. Tonight I just wanted silence. But that silence didn't last long. Because the next morning, something happened that shattered the last of my illusions, and it came from someone I never expected. I didn't sleep. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, the letter I had given her echoing through my head like some kind of emotional torture track. I tried not to picture her with him, but my mind wouldn't let me off the hook. I could still see her smiling, twirling her hair, looking like the woman I fell in love with, only none of it was for me. That image gnawed at me until the early hours of the morning when I finally heard the soft creak of the front door. I stayed still. Janine thought I was asleep, or maybe she just didn't care. She tiptoed around like a teenager sneaking in past curfew, heels in hand, trying not to make a sound. But the house was too quiet. Every step she took was deafening. She didn't come upstairs right away. I heard her moving around the kitchen, opening the fridge, pouring a drink, maybe trying to decide how to play this. I waited. 10 minutes later, she came up. I closed my eyes and kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep. She paused at the doorway, then slipped into the bathroom, took a quick shower, and climbed into bed beside me like everything was normal. Like she hadn't just crushed me in a public restaurant and laughed in another man's face while I sat a few feet away with a letter in my hand and a hole in my chest. But the next morning is where it all cracked wide open. She was still asleep when I got up. I made coffee, muscle memory more than kindness, and I sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. She had left it charging on the counter, something she never used to do. And for the first time in years, I touched it. I wasn't trying to snoop. That's what I told myself. But my fingers moved on their own. The screen lit up with a message. Last night was perfect. You looked stunning. Can't believe he still has no clue. Call me when he leaves. I just stared at it. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was quiet inside me, like something had finally gone still. I scrolled up. There were photos, conversations, a saved contact labeled Evan, Jim. But the texts were far from anything fitness-related. It wasn't just a fling. This had been going on for months. She had shared things with him she hadn't said to me in years. Jokes, secrets, photos. One message in particular crushed me completely. He's harmless, too soft to even suspect anything. He still writes me poems for anniversaries. So sad. That's when I knew. She didn't just betray me. She mocked me for loving her. I set the phone down exactly where I found it, walked upstairs, and looked at her one last time as she slept, peacefully, like nothing was wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't wake her up. I simply sat beside her on the edge of the bed and whispered, "You don't have to pretend anymore. I know." Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light, and to the truth I just laid bare. She didn't say a word, because what can you say when the game's over and the person you played stops playing along? She sat up slowly, like someone waking from a dream and realizing they're in the middle of a crime scene. Her eyes darted around the room before settling on me. There was a flicker of panic, then it vanished behind something cold and practiced, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head just in case it ever came. "Curtis, it's not what you think." I smiled. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd spent the entire night expecting that exact phrase. Maybe because I wanted to see how far she'd go with the lie before the ground crumbled beneath her. "Then what is it?" I asked quietly. She blinked, reached for the blanket, and covered her chest, like I hadn't seen every inch of her soul already unravel. "Evan is he's someone from the gym. We were talking. It got out of hand." I said nothing. She kept going, talking faster now. "You've been distant. You never look at me the same anymore." I felt invisible. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did, and I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right time. I held up her phone. "So was this the right time? At the restaurant? On our anniversary?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And that was all I needed to see. The lie had run out of steam. She knew it. I knew it. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just stood and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To get bagels," I lied. I wanted her to taste her own medicine. Let her sit in a lie that sounded small, stupid, and harmless, until it wasn't. Downstairs, I stared at the kitchen, remembering every Sunday morning we used to cook together. French toast, scrambled eggs, her dancing in mismatched socks while coffee brewed. Now it all felt fake, like a stage set built just to convince me we were still okay. I didn't go for bagels. I drove to a park instead and sat in silence with the kind of stillness you only find after a storm. I opened my phone, reread the messages, and forwarded them to my own email. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't planning anything. I just needed to not forget. Because knowing me, I might have forgiven her in a week if I didn't have proof. I've always been that way, too forgiving, too soft. The kind of man who gets called harmless in other people's texts. But something cracked that morning. Not rage, not bitterness, just a shift. A quiet, irreversible breaking of something I had spent years trying to keep alive. When I returned home, she was dressed and sitting at the kitchen table, 2 bagels on plates in front of her. She looked up like we could still fix this with breakfast. "I'm sorry," she said, eyes glossy. "I know I messed up." "You didn't mess up," I replied. "You planned it. There's a difference." Then I did something that surprised even me. I sat down across from her and began eating. I didn't say another word. I wanted her to feel every bite, every minute of silence, every breath I took while knowing exactly what she did. And I wanted her to wonder when I'd leave, because from now on, she'd be the one waiting. The silence at that breakfast table didn't last long. She couldn't take it. Janine was always uncomfortable with quiet, probably because it left too much space for the truth to echo. She fidgeted with the napkin, tore little pieces of it, avoided eye contact. And then, just like that, the floodgates opened. "I wasn't going to sleep with him," she blurted out. "It wasn't about that." I didn't even look up. "So it was emotional cheating?" She didn't answer, but the way her jaw clenched was enough. I took another bite of my bagel and stared out the window. Outside, our neighbor's dog barked like it always did. Cars passed by like any other morning. And yet, my entire life was sitting in front of me, unraveling one excuse at a time. "He listens to me," she finally whispered. That hit harder than any admission of physical betrayal. I had spent years trying to be her support system, her confidant. And now, she was telling me some stranger at the gym gave her something I couldn't. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and demand to know why I wasn't enough, why all the quiet sacrifices I made, the late nights with our sick kid, the extra shifts, the way I stayed even when I felt unloved, why none of that counted. But instead, I asked a question I hadn't let myself ask until that moment. "How long has it been going on?" She hesitated. "A few months." "Try again." She looked up sharply. "I read the messages, Janine. All of them." Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Then quietly, she said, 7, maybe 8 months. I nodded slowly. Almost a year. She had smiled at me, slept beside me, kissed me, all while carrying another man's voice in her head, another man's attention in her back pocket. "Do you love him?" I asked. She paused too long. That was my answer. Later that afternoon, she went upstairs to take a shower, and I walked into the garage. I opened the box where we kept the holiday decorations and dug out a cheap plastic bin I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a manila folder, our marriage documents, our old apartment lease, and, buried underneath, the original draft of the prenup I'd asked for before we got married. Back then, she had cried when I brought it up, said it made her feel like I didn't trust her. So I never followed through with it. Just wrote a draft, then let it go. Now I held it in my hands, wondering if maybe that version of me, the one who doubted, who feared being replaced, had seen something future me was too blinded to admit. When she came back downstairs, I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open. She walked in wearing her favorite robe, her hair still damp, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I used to believe in. "Are you leaving me?" she asked. I didn't flinch. "Not yet." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm figuring out what kind of man I want to be after this." She looked confused. maybe hurt, but I didn't owe her clarity. Not anymore. She had given her honesty to someone else. The best I could offer now was distance, and the unsettling realization that I wouldn't fight for her this time. Because sometimes, the cruelest thing you can do to someone who expects your forgiveness is give them space to sit in their own mess. 3 days passed. She was still in the house, and I let her be. I didn't demand answers, and I didn't offer any more questions. We existed like two strangers who happened to share a mortgage. She made herself coffee. I made mine. She asked if I needed anything from the store. I nodded without looking up. There were no fights, no screaming, no slamming doors. Just this tense, awful quiet, like being trapped in a room full of air you couldn't breathe. But something happened on the third night that made it all feel real. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through a job board. Don't ask me why. Maybe I needed to feel like I had something new to build, when I heard a buzz from the kitchen counter. Her phone again. Normally, I wouldn't care. But this time, something pulled my eyes toward it. One message. One tiny flash. He's acting weird. I don't think he's going to fight for me. Should I just walk? It was from Evan. He didn't say you. He said he. Like I was some placeholder. A background character in the little affair fantasy they had cooked up together. And she hadn't responded yet, which meant she saw it, or was about to. I didn't touch the phone. I just stared at the message the same way you might stare at a car crash you can't stop but also can't look away from. A minute later, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. I stayed frozen. She picked up the phone, paused, and then did the most insulting thing of all. She turned away and typed a reply with her back to me. That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done pretending. I stood up, walked past her without saying a word, and grabbed my keys. She turned slightly, caught off guard. Where are you going? I need air. Curtis, can we talk tonight? Please? I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind me and kept walking. Not driving, just walking. The kind of walking that feels like your legs are dragging your heart behind them. I walked past the gas station, past the diner we used to sneak into after midnight, past the bookstore she once said was boring. And I ended up on a park bench by the river, staring at nothing, my breath fogging in the air. For the first time since all of this started, I let the tears fall. I wasn't crying because she cheated. I was crying because somewhere along the line, I had let myself believe that love could fix everything. That if I just held on tighter, smiled through it, kept writing letters and picking up dry cleaning and remembering the small things, she'd remember, too. She'd come back to me, but she didn't. And now I was just a character in someone else's exit plan. Eventually, I pulled my phone out, not to text her, but to text my sister. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years, not since she moved to Colorado, but I just typed, "Can I come stay for a while?" She replied almost instantly, "Yes," no questions asked. And that was the first moment I felt something other than heartbreak. Relief, because I realized I didn't have to keep waiting for someone who was already halfway out the door. The next morning, I packed quietly while she was still asleep. I didn't make a dramatic scene or leave a note on the fridge. I simply placed my wedding ring on the bathroom sink, next to her expensive moisturizer, and walked out. That ring had felt like part of my skin for a decade, and now it looked like something foreign, cold, small, and out of place. I drove straight to my sister's place. 6 hours of silence, just the hum of the highway and the occasional sound of my own breathing. It wasn't until I crossed into Colorado that I realized I hadn't brought any photos with me. No framed memories, no anniversary cards, nothing from the life we'd built. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want reminders of a story I didn't recognize anymore. Jenna, my sister, opened the door before I could knock. She looked like she already knew everything, even though we hadn't spoken in weeks. One look at my face and she just hugged me. Not the kind of polite hug people give out of obligation, the kind where someone holds you up so you don't collapse. For the first few days, I barely spoke. Jenna gave me space. No questions. Just warm meals and a quiet guest room where I could lie awake at night without pretending I was okay. But on day 4, while I was drinking coffee in her kitchen, my phone rang. Janine. I didn't answer. The call went to voicemail, and a second later, she texted, "I woke up and you were gone. Please, Curtis, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because a part of me wanted to. I wanted to hear some magical explanation, a last-minute revelation that made it all make sense. But deep down, I knew there wasn't one. You don't accidentally text another man about whether to leave your husband. You don't mock someone's love in secret if there's still love left in you. Later that night, another message came. This time longer. I read the letter again. The one you gave me at the restaurant. "I don't deserve your words. I'm so sorry. I never stopped loving you. I just got lost." Lost. That word hung in the air. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But love doesn't get lost. It gets misplaced, it gets neglected, it gets buried, but not replaced. What she had with Evan wasn't confusion. It was a choice. Over and over, for months, she chose someone else. His voice, his attention, his company. And now that I was gone, she wanted to find her way back? It was too late. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email and forwarded everything to my lawyer. The messages, the screenshots, the timeline. Not to be vindictive. I wasn't trying to destroy her. But I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story to make herself the victim either. The next morning, she called again. Then again that evening. Then her mother called me. That one I did pick up. Out of respect. "She's a wreck, Curtis," her mom said gently. "She made a mistake." "No," I said quietly. "She built a second life while I was still living in the first one." That night, Janine sent one final message. "If you ever want to know the truth, I'll tell you everything. Not to fix it, just so you don't keep wondering." And for a moment, I actually considered it. But then I realized, what was the point? I already knew enough. And I had spent far too long wondering about someone who hadn't wondered about me in months. 2 weeks passed before I replied. Not to her texts, not to her calls, but to myself. I sat down one morning, opened my journal, and wrote something I never thought I would. "I'm not broken. I'm just beginning." That simple sentence changed everything. The days at my sister's place slowly stopped feeling like an escape and started feeling like a restart. I helped her repaint the porch, took her dog on long walks, and found myself laughing again over dumb things like burning toast or watching squirrels fight over a sandwich crust. Healing didn't arrive like lightning. It crept in quietly, moment by moment. I started therapy, not because I couldn't function, but because I finally wanted to understand why I stayed so long with someone who had emotionally checked out long before I did. And little by little, I saw the pattern. I was always trying to earn love instead of simply receiving it. One morning, Jenna walked in with 2 mugs of coffee and said, "You should take a road trip. Just go somewhere that doesn't remind you of her." I didn't even hesitate. I packed the same day. I drove through mountain towns, slept in old motels with creaky floors, and stopped at diners where no one knew my name. Somewhere outside of Durango, I met a retired math teacher who beat me at cards and told me, "Son, you look like someone who's finally learning to live instead of survive." He was right. I never called Janine, never replied to that last message about telling me everything. I didn't need the details. What I needed was peace, and I finally found it. It's been 6 months now. The divorce papers are finalized. I kept my dignity. She kept the house. And I kept something I didn't realize I'd lost until it was gone. Myself. Last week, I went on a date. Nothing serious. Just a coffee with someone who asked questions and actually waited for the answers. I didn't talk about Janine. I didn't feel the need to, because I finally stopped waiting for people to value me the way I should have valued myself. And the truth is, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most honest beginnings. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was there a moment that reminded you of your own experience? Share it in the comments, someone might need to hear it. And as always, thank you for being here on Reddit Confessions. Your voice matters.